How do we help kids grieve after suicide? That's the topic that we're going to address today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager, and today I have an award-winning expert guest. Her name is Dr. Natalie Ford, and she is a licensed professional counselor, an adjunct professor, a speaker, and a writer, and she refers to herself as a hope dealer. Welcome, Natalie. I am so delighted to have you share on this very important, more critical than ever topic today.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Ford, let's start with why you chose this topic of helping kids grieve after suicide. As a therapist, you have a lot of topics that you could have chosen. Why did you zero in on this particular subject?
For me, it started very personal. I lost my first husband to suicide almost 20 years ago, and then later remarried and lost my new mother-in-law to suicide as well. So I had walked this journey with my daughter twice. But as a therapist, I kept getting phone calls from people asking for recommended books and that they could read to help them with their children. And as I looked, there just really wasn't very much out there. And I just felt the Lord prompting me, I want you to write this. And to be honest, I did not want to write it. I'm tired of talking about suicide. It's been heavy, but yet the Lord just wouldn't let me go. And I realized it is a topic nobody likes to talk about. And so we need to be willing to get out there to break the stigma and talk.
When can people look for resources right after the news of the suicide comes out? Is a difficult time to even access any resources. Can you talk about what that shock period is like, what that deep, deep trauma period is like, and how people can deal with that right at the very beginning stages?
Yeah, you said it when you said you're in shock. It's like you're just functioning. You're just in survival mode. It's like this heavy cloud is over you and it's hard to see or know what to do. And you just kind of go through the motions. And I remember personally having people tell me, okay, it's time to eat. It's time to get ready for bed, like having to tell me basic things that I normally would have done on my own, but I just really couldn't even think. And so to be able to make decisions about helping your children is very overwhelming because you can barely function yourself in those early days. So it's so important to have people come alongside you and help you during that time.
Should parents access counseling resources for their kids right away because they're in that space of shock and not being able to handle even the basic things that they have to do in that moment?
I think it depends. I think if the child and the parent both have supportive resources and people they can talk to while the shock wears off, they might be able to be okay. Sometimes counseling too soon is not helpful because you're in such shock, you're not ready to talk about it. And then when you actually need it, you think, well, it didn't help before. Well, it didn't help before because you weren't ready. And so sometimes waiting and let the shock wear off might be a better option.
Let's talk about that transition because you're right. The early counseling, the person's not feeling like it's even real yet at that very beginning. They just keep thinking, this didn't really happen. This shouldn't have happened. And all of those things that are going on. Plus, there's just that flurry of things to do and deal with that are so difficult. You may have lost some of your support resources in that period because people around you don't know how to respond to suicide properly. People are either staying away or they're saying all the wrong things. So what do you do to know when it's time to get professional help from somebody that really knows how to respond well?
Yeah, I think when your daily functioning, when it's been a month or two have passed and you still are struggling with those basic life tasks, then it may be time to talk to someone else, or the heaviness or all of those difficult questions that come with suicide loss, that complicated grief. You ask the why, you feel guilt, you feel shame. There's a lot of blame going on. Maybe you're blaming others, or maybe you're being blamed. There's just so many questions. And when those questions seem so overwhelming that you aren't able to function without feeling overwhelmed, then it might be a good time to reach out to somebody else and just have that support. And I often tell people, if you don't feel like counseling is an option, there are some great support groups for survivors of suicide loss where you can talk with other survivors who've experience similar pain and who often get it, whereas your support system might not really get why you feel the shame and the guilt and all the things.
How do we access those support groups? Can you mention some of the names of the support groups that we can look for that?
Yes, if you look for the American Suicide Prevention Foundation, ASPF, .com, you can look and there's a list of support groups there. Survivors of Suicide, SOS groups, are the most common. And you can go in and put your state and it will tell you by your zip code what is available in your area. And I led a group for 15 years and just found it was so helpful, because when I went through my loss, the initial loss, there were no groups like that. And I just kept thinking, where are the people who've lived this? I need them. And so once we started the group and I was able to connect, it not only helped me continue in my own healing, but it helped others as well. It was very helpful.
And I love that we're talking about dealing with the parents' situation first. It's kind of put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on your child in a airplane accident. So what do we do when we are stable enough to respond to what's going on with our child, or even if we're not, because the child is sitting there, depending on the age of a child, either not at all understanding what just happened, or only understanding in a way that is incredibly distressing for them. As they get older and older, children are going to be more deeply impacted, especially teenagers, which is a really difficult time for them to be processing this type of grief, especially with so much rampant suicide going on among adolescents right now. Can you talk about what to watch for in your children and how to explain this to them at the different age levels?
Yeah, you mentioned so many great things in what you just said. And I just want to reiterate that as a parent, it's so important first that we take care of ourselves, because our children often regulate based off of us. And so if we are chaotic, they're going to be chaotic. And if they see that mom or dad are okay, that gives them some hope that maybe I'll be okay. As far as talking with the children and helping them navigate, the first thing I would say is be honest. Do not lie to your children. Be completely honest. But now, honesty does not mean you have to give them all the information up front. You want to give them age appropriate information, what they can handle. So a preschooler, all they may need to know is that somebody they love died. That may be sufficient. But an older elementary school child is going to need to know a lot more. I talked to one man who his mother died by suicide when he was in elementary school, and his parents would never, or his family would not talk to him about it. They wouldn't bring it up. And so he filled in the gaps himself, and he grew up believing that his father murdered his mother. So his primary attachment figure he distanced from, because he thought dad killed mom, when in fact it was suicide. Whereas if they had been honest with him about it, he could have leaned into his dad and they would have a much different relationship today. So while they didn't lie, they also didn't answer his questions. And so I think we let our children kind of take the lead, in that if they're asking questions, we give them honest answers. And we also understand as they continue to get older, their questions are going to change, and they're going to want more information. And so being willing to share that with them when they're ready. And also knowing there are times children don't want to talk about it. You know, I remember a season when my daughter took down all the pictures of her dad because she said, it makes me sad. I don't want to see him. And so I wasn't going to push her to talk about it. I had to wait until she was ready. And so I think, being really honest. And then the second part of that I would stress is helping children know this is not their fault. Children tend to blame themselves and think of what all they did that maybe disappointed or let down their loved one. So letting them know that they are not responsible for this loss.
Natalie, I know that you have a lot of wonderful things in the book that you just released. So can you talk about your guide, your resource that you have developed to give to families so that they can walk their kids through this process of not really fully recovering? We don't use that word in grief, but being able to move forward with the grief in their lives.
Yes. So I try and give language that you can use to talk to children about suicide at the various developmental levels, what to say, what not to say. We also have a whole chapter in taking care of yourself as a parent. The importance of routine. You want to do things with your children that you would have done pre-suicide, post-suicide to keep life normal. They tend to thrive by routine and knowing what's coming. And so suicide has kind of rocked that world. So we want to help them maintain a routine. We also talk about what are the different emotional responses children often have. And by children, I mean from really preschool to teenagers is what I'm referring to. And we look at the different levels. And so what's normal and what maybe needs some professional attention, what's not normal and when to get help. And then we also talk about continuing bonds. How do we help our children remember and honor the people who have died and to carry them with them in their heart and in their memories and how to develop those. And so in addition to kind of talking through these things, we also follow a fictional family who has experienced suicide loss to kind of see how they implement the tools and techniques that are presented in the book.
So can you list the title and where people can find this book?
Yes, it is Through the Tears, Helping Children Grieve After Suicide Loss. And it is available on Amazon and also on my website, which is drfordwrites.com.
I hope that all of you listening will access Dr. Ford's very important resource, if not for your own family, for those that are in your community that may suffer from this horrible tragedy. And of course, I also hope that you will come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.